start first by thanking Barry Anderson, my partner in crime, who has been planning our non-conference. The two of us have been working very diligently over the last year and a half to make this happen, and he's been really, really central in making sure the trains are running on time and keeping us all together and organizing all of this, and also in being so central in welcoming me here to NYU. This is my second year here, so quite a coup to have great colleagues and people to work with and be able to run a non-conference. I also want to thank all the students who have worked really tirelessly over the last few weeks across organizing various aspects of this program, including the program, the website, Facebook, Twitter feeds, helping with all of the other logistics and things getting set up, and we'll mention them specifically in a little bit. As well as our sponsors, we have the Office of Global Affairs, the Department of Administration, Leadership, and Technology, and my own Department of Humanities and Social Sciences here at the Steinhardt School. I also want to mention Education International, and particularly Angelo Bravoledos, for his tireless work on EI's global response. And as we've worked on and discussed this over the last few years, I really felt we needed to do something here in the US that shares the global impact and brought together the great work of scholars, unionists, local and international researchers, and people from virtually every discipline enrolled together. For if we really want to create a global response, we have to understand the deep contours and connections of the corporate education reform movement. So thank you to Angelo. And thanks also to all of you for joining us here in this non-conference conversation about how private interest in for-profit industry has grown to dominate the education agenda in many different parts of the world. And I think it's not just about public versus private schools, or writing a check, or making a donation to schools, or worse yet, redirecting public funding to the private sector. This goes all the way down to the fundamental shifts of the nature of knowledge, of how we teach and how we measure and design learning. And this has greatly impacted schools and teachers around the world. So in our non-conference, we wanted to bring together scholars, activists, advocates, to think about how deeply and detrimentally this idea has permeated our own lives and work, in schools, at the university, and in our own respective organizations. More importantly, how it's disproportionately impacted poor communities and countries that are desperately trying to keep up with the global economy. We originally thought we'd have 20 to 30 people in a room sitting around a table to share ideas and experiences, but as the word got out and blogs started really popping with commentary and insights, and the many books that have come out over the last 3 years, we figured we needed to have a wider umbrella to bring people together. So this happened in a really organic way, and I think that's an important thing to keep in mind over the next 2.5 days. This is it's not the end, it's not a one-off event, it's about a conversation of bringing people together to share and work. And we know that everybody's really busy and have pressed time, so we're really grateful for your commitments to this cause and to thinking about these things together, and for taking the time out to do this. As we begin the evening, I want to take a quick moment to highlight some of the issues that we're raising and the questions we're asking. And really, they're about education as a fundamental human right and as a public good, and ultimately about what the purposes of education are. These ideas are not really part of the US nomenclature any longer, and instead the ideas about the market, competition for goods and services, and education as an investment opportunity for both consumers and companies have abounded. So rarely is equity part of that equation. So we want to keep equity and human rights and education rights back on the table. We also wanted to underscore the importance of conversation and engagement with research, ideas, and experiences on the ground, sharing a dialogue that provides a counter-narrative to the corporate education reform rhetoric. Teachers and kids' lives matter, and they face the greatest consequences for this movement. Lastly, I want to underscore the reason we're bringing together academics, unionists, and advocates from all around the world. This is unique in that it brings a global and comparative perspective to the issues that we tend to think about as being in the domestic realm. So issues of school funding, governance, and management of education systems, we tend to think of these as our own issues, but they really now are influencing each other. The spheres of influences are astounding. Consider the current example of Liberia handing over the entire education sector to one private company, Bridge Academies, which sells education on tablets with a pay-as-you-go model. It's really important for American audiences to recognize that the US and the UK are in many ways at the epicenter and the key promulgators of this for-profit education movement. And our panel's that we have put together really discuss this. What we're going to talk about over the next few days, and I'm so happy to have our speakers because they're going to lay out these issues, how key actors, policies, and laws and financing of education changes dramatically. The abuse of standardized testing and the role of the tech industry. Issues of corporate and government greed, as we've seen in the last week with the release of the Panama Papers. Concerns over trade, taxation, laws, and policies that undermine the public sector and erode the local autonomy to make education decisions. And lastly, the devaluing and deprofessionalization of teachers and the handing over schools to education management organizations and people with no background or experience at all in education. So underlying this are stories of how ideas are imported, adopted, forced, and embraced around the world, and what they mean for issues of equity, autonomy, cultural and social relevance. In our own struggles and battles, we tend to forget how all of these things are interconnected. So we want to welcome you here over the evening and the next 2 days, where we're bringing together scholars from Argentina, Australia, Canada, Chile, Mexico, South Africa, India, Brazil, the Philippines, Uganda, the UK, other places. Also advocates who've conducted research on the role of multinational corporations, privatization, the impact of public education in the US and globally, including Pearson, Bridge Academies, Teach for All, Gates, the Broad Foundation, the Walton Foundation, Alex. So these are all issues that we're going to be bringing up over the next few days, and all of your work brings those issues to the fore. But let's think together about how they connect and what we can do around them. So we've also ordered up a lot of excitement for you here at NYU. Bernie Sanders will be on the park tomorrow night. We have Weekend on the Square this weekend with prospective students and lots of demonstrations and protests around, as always. So tonight we have a wonderful lineup of special guests who I think will offer a well-threaded narrative of the global and corporate actors, philanthropreneurs, and models of global education reform movement. And I'm going to turn it over to Gary, who will introduce our panelists. But thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
This is sort of all of our fantasy panel up here. These are the sort of folks who have been in the trenches doing this work for several years and really have given us the sort of contours of the sort of map of not only global policy networks, but the whole issues around privatization and so on. And so we're going to go in the order. I'm going to introduce folks in the order that they're going to be speaking. We're going to start off with Diane Ravitch, who is a research professor of education at New York University and a historian of education. She's a native of Houston and a graduate of the Houston Public Schools. And you recall that great chapter in your book about the Houston high school teacher that wouldn't be considered very good under the current accountability. I love that. It's my favorite chapter. I won't go through all of her educational background, but she was Assistant Secretary of Education and Counselor to Secretary of Education Lamar Alexander in the administration of President George H.W. Bush. And from 1997 to 2004, she was a member of the National Assessment Governing Board, which oversees the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is the federal testing program. She was appointed by the Clinton administration Secretary of Education Richard Riley in 1997 and reappointed by him in 2001. From 1995 until 2005, she held the Brown Chair in Education Studies at the Brookings Institution and edited Brookings Papers on Educational Policy. Her most recent two books, which many of you I'm sure are familiar with, although she's written many, many more, is The Death and Life of the Great American School System, How Testing and Choice Are Undermining Education, and her latest book, Reign of Error. Diane will be followed by Anthony Verger. Did I get that right? I don't know if that's the Catalan pronunciation. Verger, okay. Is a Ramon y Cajal researcher at the Department of Sociology of the University of Barcelona, and I won't even try to pronounce Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona. He was awarded a PhD in sociology from the same university in December 2007 for his work on the World Trade Organization and the international liberalization of education. After his PhD, he became a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Amsterdam. Currently, his main areas of research are the global governance of education reform and the analysis of education privatization, public-private partnerships, and quasi-markets in education and their impact on education inequalities. Following Tony will be Janelle Scott, beloved former colleague of mine here at NYU, which we mourn every day. Miss her very much. And Janelle is a Chancellor's Associate Professor at the University of California, Berkeley, in the Graduate School of Education at the Goldman School of Public Policy and in African American Studies. She earned a PhD in Ed Policy from the University of California, Los Angeles, Graduate School of Education and Information Studies, and a BA in Political Science from the University of California, Berkeley, where she currently is a professor. Before earning her doctorate, she worked as an elementary school teacher in Oakland, California. You didn't mention here TFA, no? Scott's research investigates the politics of elite and community-based advocacy, the politics of research utilization, and how market-based educational reforms such as school choice and privatization affect democratic accountability and equity within schools and school districts. And she was, I would say, the scholar who first introduced us to the role of venture philanthropy in education, and particularly their role in race in education. And finally, Pauline Lipman is a professor of educational policy studies, University of Illinois, Chicago. Her research focuses on race and class inequality in schools, globalization, and the political economy and racial politics of urban education. Her newest book is The New Political Economy of Urban Education, Neoliberalism, Race, and the Right to the City. She is a director of the Collaborative for Equity and Justice in Education, which does community collaborative research and is active in coalitions of teachers and community organizations challenging neoliberal education policies in Chicago. And she's been instrumental in the takeover of the Chicago Teachers Union by Social Movement Union, CORE, and also the recent April 1st stuff at Chicago that the press didn't cover as much as we would like, but I'm sure she'll talk about that tonight. So, without any more ado, let's get on with the show.